Postal here in the boardroom, calling the Academic Advisory Committee member or Academic Advisory Committee meeting to order at 5:45. At this time, we'll ask the secretary to proceed with the roll call to see if there is a quorum in place.
Good evening. We'll start with roll. Nate Collins, he has called in.
Excused.
He will not be present. Reginald Durandis from Ayiti and Action Inc. Laura Fellman, School Board District 6 member.
Here.
Rachel Frischberg, School Board District 3 member.
Here.
Randy Gabriel, ESC Advisory Council. Sherelle Golden, School Board District 1 member.
Here.
Latoria Hilliard, Coalition for Black Student Achievement. Gabriela Mendez, Hispanic Education Coalition.
I'm here.
Eugenia Millender, School Board District 7 member. Sharman Postel, Palm Beach County Council of PTA, PTSA.
Present in the room.
Sheila Scott Lubin, Palm Beach State College.
Here.
Imran Siddiqui, School Board District 5.
Present.
And Christine Tibbs, School Board District 2.
Present.
We do have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We actually have a quorum in the room, which will allow us to go right into Academic Advisory meeting minutes from December 11th. As noted, we were not here for the January meeting. So at this time, the Academic Advisory meeting minutes were distributed via email previously to you, to each member of the committee, as well as attached in the calendar of invite, if I'm not mistaken, right, Ms. Wood?
Yes.
Thank you. At this time, I'll entertain a motion for the approval of minutes.
A motion to approve the minutes. This is Christine.
Motion by Christine.
This is Aaron. Happy to second it.
Who was it? Second by Siddiqui. Any discussions around the approval of the minutes? All in favor? Aye. Any objections? Motion carried for the approval of minutes as distributed. At this time, we allow for public comment, and we do have a public comment in the room. Prior to the public comment in the room to entertain if they would like to speak, I am going to turn the attention to our individuals that's online. Is there any public commenters online at this time? Given the opportunity to unmute, hearing none, we'll turn our attention to the room, to the public, to the person that is in the room to comment. If you would like to state your name, and if you would like to comment at all.
Paige Lewis, but I don't have a comment. I'm just here to listen.
Okay. We do have a public commenter who does not choose to does not have anything to say in the room, which will take us to the next agenda item. Thank you for being here. Update from Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Glenda Sheffield.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And it's February 12th, but I will say Happy New Year to you because we did not meet in January because it was our first day back from the winter break. And of course, we wanted to make certain that the meeting that we were having was going to be meaningful. And I cannot wait until Dr. Miller Our chief of assessment is going to take a deeper dive in regards to our Progress Monitoring 1, Progress Monitoring 2 data. So I'm definitely excited that we have a quorum tonight, but I will be more exciting. We have the room set up. So for those of you that would like to come and join us in person, don't forget about us. We're still here in the boardroom. I asked Diane to just make certain that we go ahead and set up, with your cards and your folders and everything. So if you decide that you're going to come in one day for one of the meetings, you're definitely welcome. We'd love to see you all here in person. But thank you. I'm so excited that we have a quorum this evening. I do have a few updates that I'm going to share with you. I'm not going to spend a lot of time because I do want to yield some of my time to Dr. Miller, because I know that we will go into some deep conversations around the progress that are being made. The first item that I want to share with you that will be coming out, and you probably will start getting questions from your constituents, from the community that you're associated with, is that right now we have worked out our FY24 summer school programs and date. So at the next meeting, I will be sharing with you, I will create some slides to literally share with you the programs that we will be offering to continue some academic learning for our students over this summer. But just for intended purposes, if you wanted to jot these dates down, I did release the dates today to the schools. We are ahead of the game. Because we do have families that are starting to ask as they're planning for their summers. We will be releasing the district bulletin and start some marketing campaigns there very shortly. But our summer programs for our students is going to be June 10th through July the 18th. June 10th through July the 18th. And with those dates, the students will have 2 days in which they will consider to be vacation days for them during that time frame, which is going to be June 19th and July 4th. Those are the 2 days that they will have off during the June 10th through July 18th summer programming dates. Our students that are participating in our Jumpstart program, those students, of course, will go, and I'm sorry, the programs are Monday through Thursday, but our Jumpstart students, they will have to go 5 days a week, but their classes on Friday will be virtually, and they will go an additional week. But our Head Start, for our families that do have students that are in our Head Start programs, those dates are a little different. Because of clock hours for our Head Start and state requirements, our Head Start summer program will run June 3rd through July the 11th. And our VPK is also obligated to get so many clock hours during the summer. I think they have to get 300 hours. So with our VPK students, those VPK program is going to run June 5th through August 1st. So they are much longer than the others. Then, of course, for our students with the seniors, the class of 2024, our seniors that may have had some hiccups and do not graduate in the spring during our May ceremonies, those students will continue during the summer. And we're going to be working real hard getting them graduated over the summer. If they had some hiccups and not making it spring, and their summer school graduation will be July 18th. But again, I'm going to provide you some very specific information as it pertains to the programs at our next meeting where you can see it. I'll put it on some slides, but this information was released today to our schools as families are beginning to ask. The next thing that I do want to share is that what we do tend to get from our community as well, and we started it last year, is that it was asked that as we consider, because we know childcare is very big and there's never enough room for our childcare programs, is that could we make it to where we had a district-wide registration? And we started it last year, and it worked very well, meaning that all district-operated schools opened up aftercare registration at the same time. And additional information will be coming. We will be marketing it. But our district-wide after-school registration is going to be April 17th. That's a very important date as well. And another one, we heard a lot of information last year talking around our transition to kindergarten program, which worked exceptionally well. This is where, We worked very closely with our private providers, with the Early Learning Coalition, with the Children's Services Council, and where we really collaborated and we came together and as we collaborated and provided some resources to our families as we prepare our students to enter us for kindergarten. And we're going to be kicking off our transition to kindergarten, the campaign with the registration for our students. It's going to be the week of April 8th through the 12th. So again, this is a lot of information I know that I'm giving to you, but you're going to start seeing the marketing campaigns and everything that I'm sharing with you. I'm just informing the community in the work that we're doing in terms of just trying to get our students and making certain that they are adequately prepared. Also, as we came back into the new year, I had the opportunity of, we've had 2 dedications of our brand new schools that have opened this year. We had Dr. Joaquin Garcia that had their dedication program right when we returned from the holidays. Unfortunately, I was sick, got sick over the holidays and did not return. I was trying to recover, so I missed that particular dedication ceremony. However, I did have the opportunity to attend the dedication ceremony of West Boynton Middle School. So just kudos to, both principals at both of those schools, Dr. Joaquin Garcia, with Dr. Oscar is doing an amazing job there, Otero, and as well as, the principal there, Mr. Picia there at West Boynton Beach Middle School, West Boynton Middle School. So if you hadn't had the opportunity to visit either of those campuses, I could tell you they both are just very delightful. And then lastly, before I turn over, because I'm going to lead into some conversation about our discussion here this afternoon, is about an opportunity that about 1,200 of our students had an opportunity to participate with the Business Development Board back on January the 28th. We had about 1,200 students with Kelly Smallridge and the group there with the Business Development Board, again, in collaboration with the district and with our choice department, to where, they provided an opportunity for us to bring our students. They had several local businesses, that were there at the convention center, to where they really just showcase their businesses and talking to our students in regards to the career side of things and what are the opportunities here in Palm Beach County. And this past Thursday on February 8th, that same event at a smaller scale, of course, was taken there to the Western community, to Glade Central and Pahokee Middle Senior High School. So I do want to, just thank, the Business Development Board's Kelly Smallridge and that team for the partnership and the work that they are doing in working with us and providing the opportunities there to our students. And lastly, Chair, from myself, in terms of an update, is that, when back on January the 22nd, you're going to hear from Mr. Miller as we look at our Progress 1, Progress 2 student data, is that on January the 22nd, we worked and at the request of the superintendent, where we really looked at all of the departments here at the district office. We looked at certification, we looked at individuals that had the capacity, that were able to go into schools and work directly what we call student-facing support. So right now we've deployed about a little over 80 staff that are actually going out to the schools about 3 days a week, 2 to 3 hours during those days, to where they're actually working in the classroom. They're with the teachers, providing what is called student-facing support, working with students where they're planning for this small group instruction. So we're looking to where it will have an impact, because as we look at our data, we can see that our students need some additional support. So we have embraced that, and we have pushed out some additional resources to our schools. So where we have done a lot in terms of building the instructional pedagogy during the professional development, working alongside with our teachers and coaching, we have now shifted that model to now working directly there with our students. So I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that this evening as Dr. Miller share with us where we are right now as it pertains to Progress Monitoring 1 and 2, because we know the next set of data that we will receive will be actually, our students will be taking Progress Monitoring 3, which will be in the spring. So that will conclude my, my report.
Thank you, Dr. Sheffield. Are there any questions online for Dr. Sheffield at this time? Hearing none, we'll move along in the agenda. Library Media Services update, Mr. Nolan Rowell. Am I saying your name right?
You're really close. So.
Okay.
Close enough. Nolan Rowell.
Nolan Rowell.
So at this point, everything seems to be running along very smoothly. Knock on wood. And the orders, we're anticipating them to slow down a little bit with library materials and pick up more with instructional materials. So you'll see a little bit of that trend. But besides that, everything else seems to be going along well. And we thank you guys for continuing to provide that feedback that we need for that process.
Very welcome. Any questions at this time for Mr. Rao? Hearing none, thank you so much. You can choose to stay for the rest of the meeting or have the rest of your evening back. Have a great evening. At this time, we will, and we didn't get, if the secretary could just ensure that we capture our no longer a guest here at AAC, Dr. Miller, for attendance purposes. We will go ahead right on with the presentation from the FDOE Progress Monitoring, PM12, PM1 and PM12, and all of the other presentation that we have. I ask that the members of the committee please allow Mr. or Dr. Miller to please present. And if he would like to stop in the middle of his presentation and ask for questions, he will do so. Otherwise, please allow him to go through his presentation. And at the conclusion of his presentation, we will entertain questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Postal. Good evening, everyone. It's great to be here. Congratulations if you're a Chiefs fan like me. We had a great night last night. My name is Adam Miller. I'm here to present. I know Dr. Houchins is also on the agenda. He's, however, a 49ers fan, so I gave him the night off.
Well, I'm an Usher fan, Dr. Miller.
Okay. Usher did well as well. I'm here to present on progress monitoring results from our state progress monitoring assessments. However, you have a bonus presentation tonight. FY23 graduation rate data came in just a few weeks ago, so I will go through some of that with you as well. So just starting off, I'd like to start off with a few definitions. As you work around schools out in the community, you might hear some of these. So I just want to make sure, and we'll go through some of this in the presentation. So I want to kind of level set. The first one is PM level or progress monitoring level. This is the performance level assigned by FAST. The FAST is the new test, placing students on that 1 to 5 scale, which we're used to. We know 3 is on grade level or above. The interesting thing about the PM level, and this took me a moment to really understand, but the state has an end of the year expectation, which we're going to get to the scale scores in a little bit. They actually score our students against the end of the year expectation each PM they take. So for example, when the students took the test in the fall in August and September, their scores were actually scored against the end of the year expectation. So that means the students haven't learned the standards yet because they haven't been instructed yet. So we tend to see a lot more level 1 and 2 students from the state data because of that. And then we see it get better in PM2 and then much better in PM3. The second level I'll be providing tonight is a predicted level. And that's a performance level we assign by the district. We've done in the past, we used to have our district diagnostic assessments. We are now using progress monitoring 1 and 2 and some local assessments to predict end of the year performance. This is only the second year of the progress monitoring assessment, so it may not be 100% accurate, but we will get more accurate as we go along in the years with this new assessment system. This data, the predicted level data, is helpful because we can kind of see in a point in time where we think the students will end up at the end of the year. And then to Dr. Sheffield's points from before, For the school support that's going in, these predicted levels help us identify students that would need extra support and grade levels in schools and such. The next two are about the scores that the students actually get, not the level, but the scale score. So the first one we call provisional score. I'm not going to really go into it too much here, but that's when they started this progress monitoring assessments last year, they actually started using the old FSA scale. And they kept that in place until just recently. So that old FSA scale is called the provisional score. It was used all last year, and it was used this fall for FY24 PM1. The state has since released in November and December what's called a retrofit score, which is the student scores on the new scale, which I'll show you in a second. That was applied to all students who took the PM2 assessment and will be used for all future PM assessments. Provisional scores for this fall, as well as spring last year, have been replaced with retrofit scores, but I'll talk more about that in a second to explain more. So these are the new scale scores. It might be hard to see, but it starts at the top table is English language arts. It's broken up by grade level. The first column then goes level 1. Then we have different buckets in level 1 for learning gains. Level 2 is broken up to 2 buckets, level 3, 4, and 5. Those are the columns. The range from the FAST ELA goes from the lowest of 140 points in grade 3, level 1, all the way up to 308 points for a level 5 student in 10th grade. Just to point out the differences, I believe the old scale was 240 was the lowest level 1 in 3rd grade, and it was over 412, I believe, or 413 at the highest level 5 in 10th grade. So there's definitely a change in the scale there, so they're not really directly comparable. Okay, let's get a little bit more into this provisional and retrofit scores. Let me just describe what you're seeing here. This table has 2 big sections, FY23 and FY24. FY23 is broken up into 3 columns, PM1, 2, and 3. And so is FY24, because those are the 3 progress monitoring assessments we take. When the tests were first given, the scale used was that provisional scale, all of last year. And then you can see here with this first PM1 in the fall, that was the provisional. When we hit PM2, the state released what's called the retrofit scores, and we'll have that going forward. They have since updated some of the scales. They've updated the fall PM1 scale to the retrofit scale, or the new scale, as well as the spring from last year. The state is eventually going to release retrofit fall, PM1 and 2 data from last year, but they haven't done so yet, and we're not really sure when they're going to. Something to note, especially for the parents, there is a parent portal, a state parent portal, where you can go in and get your children's scores, or you can go into our SIS. The scores that were reported in PM1 or the end of the school year last year were those provisional scores. If you go in now to look at it, they are now retrofit. They've been replaced, and you will not be able to see the old provisional scores. So just want to make sure everyone's aware of that. SIS. Okay. So moving forward, let's talk about, I talked about the PM level, which is the 1 through 5 level that the state test assigns to students based on the end of the year expectation. What you see here are 2 sets of clustered bars. The first set is reading, on the right set is math. Each of the color codes denotes level. Red is level 1, yellow is level 2, green is level 3, light blue is level 4, and then the deep blue is level 5. This first column here on the left is the end of the year last year, PM3. This is retrofit if you need to know. However, this is the end of the year where the students ended up, where our percentages were. Coming in the fall in PM1, we can see, as we would expect, students would do worse because they haven't learned the standards yet. So you can, I'm not going to read the numbers, but you can just see the colors, the changes there. But then when you look in PM2, you start to see that growth. You see less reds, less yellows, more greens, and more blues, which is what we want to see. And we would expect by the end of the year, which we saw last year, that there would be more greens and blues and less yellows and reds. We see the same thing to the right on math. We can see where we ended. The first column is where we ended last year on math. And then you can see PM1. What's interesting about math is really skill-based, and you can really see the students need to really learn those standards, whereas reading kind of layers on itself on the standards. So you can see this really dramatic drop of level ones of the reds from PM1 to 2 here. It's actually a 20% drop, which is great. And we expect to see that pattern continue. So, however, the scoring students against the end of the year expectation, I mean, it's going to be helpful for showing progress. However, it's not going to be helpful for our schools and our teachers. I talked about those predicted levels, and we use those predicted levels to identify students that might need more support and other things. And what this table shows us is the district percent level 3 plus. Let me orient you to this table. We have reading as the column 2 and 3. Then we have math, science, and civics. And each of the subject areas has 2 columns. The first column is current prediction. We call it checkpoint 3. We're doing 4 checkpoints this year to see how our students are doing. And then the second column is where the students actually ended up in the spring in that grade level or grade level band and subject. The rows, we have the district 3 through 10, which is what we count into our school grades. Then we have a K2 row. We have a grade 3 only. We have a 3 through 5 grade row, a 6 through 8, 9 through 12, and then we add algebra and geometry. So just to kind of talk this out, the district at the end of the year last year, 3 through 10 in reading was about 49% on or above grade level. And then we're coming in predicted right now at 50% on or above grade level. And that's how you would read it. And that's how we could identify students that need additional support and other things. You might notice that there's a lot of non-color coded cells and then 1 green and some red. The cells that are not color coded, that means they're very similar to the score we were at last year. We're currently very similar to where we were last year. I'll say that differently. If they're red, that means we dropped or we're predicted to drop 2 points or more, 2 percentage points or more. It's highlighted green if we're predicted to increase by 2 percentage points or more. Again, we use these predictions every year in our school district to target supports and extra supports for our students and others. So we can see where we are here. Generally in reading, we're about the same except for K2. And we went up a bit in 9th through 12th reading, which is great, predicted to go up. And then we see in math, we're predicted to not do so well in our secondary schools. So our schools are currently digging into that as we recently shared this data. Leave this up for another second, and I'm going to jump on to another data set. Okay. Now I'm going to break this down by subgroup. This is a lot of data points. I'm not going to read each one to you guys. However, I will say the table at the top is reading. The table at the bottom is math. We've broken this up by each of our major subgroups. It follows the same general trend, the same pattern as the previous slide, where we start with our current prediction and then where we were at the end of the year last year, and we break it up into grade bands of K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10. This generally follows the pattern we saw overall for the district. We saw, increases in 9 through 10 reading. So we see that reflected in each of the subgroups. And the rest were similar. So some of the subgroups you might see were kind of taken together, ended up being a very similar score for the overall district. Looking at math, again, we see a very similar pattern. With our secondary schools, we see more drops, predicted drops of 2 percentage points or more. And we are working on that as a district. Moving forward, I also have science and civics here. Again, we were very similar overall as a district. However, we can see here in the science, we have grade 5, grade 8, and the biology EOC. we can see we're knocking it out of the park in our biology EOC. And our Ls, our students, our English language learners are growing nicely in science. With civics, again, kind of taken together between the increases, it ends up being very similar, again, follows the same general pattern.
Adam, but
Yes.
as you go through as we look at the data charts in itself and looking at the comparison, I do appreciate this, but I also think it's important that for a special note is that when we look at this and what we always think about is in regards to, and as a staff, as we're digging deep and looking at the data, it's like what benchmark or standard has been taught to the full extent, right? Because all of the assessments, it covers all standards. And of course, when we're working from a scope and sequence, it's very likely that they are being tested on a benchmark or a standard that they may not have gotten to. So that's part of the data analysis that we have to do. And what we've done here, Dr. Miller was an instrumental part of that and working with the team this past Thursday where we had essentials here. And so like what we're doing now and just going through, well, that's what we did with essentials is that when we look at the data that Dr. Miller and the team provided, we really look in regards to what has been taught to the full extent, to the fullest extent. And then we go in, we look at pertains to the item specification in regards to what exactly is it that particular benchmark or standard is calling for. Then we provide some resources, particularly to those particular areas. Definitely dug in if it was something that should have been already been taught to the full extent of the standard, because that's important for us to know, right? So I didn't mean to cut you off,
no.
but as we look at this data, I think it's very important because one will think to say, well, this is not good. Well, we have to think in regards to this is data that they took when they got back from the winter holidays, and many of the standards they may not have been taught to the fullest extent. I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
thank you, Dr. Sheffield. Excellent addition. I appreciate that. You actually stole what I was going to say. I'll just add to what Dr. Sheffield said. The wonderful thing about this FAST assessment is something we never had before from the state on the FCAT or the FSA assessment is actually benchmark data. We've never been able to see that on the state tests. Parents can go in and see it on the parent portal to see how your students did on benchmarks or benchmark bands. But however, we now are getting benchmark data where we can share that with schools and teachers can dig in and see what benchmarks their students need to work more on of the ones to Dr. Sheffield's point that they've already been taught. So I didn't bring that data because it's a lot of data points. So, which is a nice benefit of the FAST assessment. So that actually brings me to the end of my, PM update. I want to stop and see if there's any questions.
Absolutely. Dr. Mendez, your hand was up first, so we'll go ahead and acknowledge you at this time. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I have two questions. One is you just mentioned that the teachers can also see the benchmark data, I assume, if the parents can see it. Now, can they see it specifically by standard and by each standard has different components, the learning targets, right? Some of them are different kinds of learning targets. They could be dispositions, usually not, but can the teacher see how the students are doing in different learning targets? Because my experience is that it's very hard for teachers to unpack at the level of learning targets, and they tend to focus more on the content knowledge learning target and less on the skills. And I would help them to see the results by learning targets. And I don't know if the data is that at that level of specificity.
Unfortunately, no. We are happy we got benchmark data, but we're not able to drill in past that. However, we do have our local common assessments called FSQs and USAs that the teachers can drill in by specific sections or pieces of each standard, depending on what they've taught and what's been taught to that point.
Yeah, thank you. And my other question was, Dr. Schiffer was mentioning that some results may had to do with the fact that not the whole benchmark, or not everything was taught and it's being assessed. That was the implication. That's what I understood. Are we assessing students on things they have not been taught yet? And if that's the case, what's the point? The goal of assessing is to know, well, one of the goals is to see how much the students have learned from what was taught.
That's a great question. So I moved back to the overall data I showed at the very beginning, which is our progress monitoring, the PM level, right? It's the score, how the student did, in PM1 in the fall or PM2 in the winter against the end of the year expectation. To answer your question, yes, in PM1 in the fall, students were tested on the majority of standards in that subject area and grade level that they would be assessed on at the end of the year. The goal, my understanding, is to show progress, and it's progress monitoring from the beginning to the middle to the end. That's all I can share on that. As far as the why that came from Tallahassee.
And thank you. And I'll add on to that, Adam. And I think, and you're correct. And that's where that's the state portion around the progress monitoring 1, 2, 3, what have you. But then where we come in, Dr. Menez, will be around our formative and summative assessments that we provide, such as our FSQs and our unit assessments. And so our FSQs and our unit assessments, those assessments are literally attached to the scope and sequence. So as they're following the scope and sequence, then at the end of that particular unit or what have you, the teacher can provide that assessment that's going to give them a true indicator in regards to what was taught during that scope and sequence time. And so attached to that, once they've done with the FSQs or the unit assessments, and for those students that may not have done well, that's what we talk about, where we have built in some additional resources that are standard-based that the teachers could utilize during small group instruction to continue to build and scaffold that standard that student may not have done well on.
Wonderful, thank you. And the third question is, we clearly saw differences in different groups, subgroups of students. So what's the plan to address that gap, or more than gap is the educational depth that we have with some group of students?
Well, the plan, and I'm sure Dr. Miller is coming in too. I mean, we're definitely tag teaming. You can tell we're getting excited about this because this is the work that we do every day. But a big part of that plan is that when we were looking at the data, like I indicated, is that we have some really strong, I want to say, practitioners here that are within the central office. So like I indicated back starting January 22nd, where we've identified everyone with their teaching certificate, looking at their expertise. And I can speak from the curriculum department. Dr. Miller has some from assessment, from ed tech, and some other various departments, to where we've worked with the principal supervisors, we've worked with Mr. Attorney, to where these individuals now, like I said, where they've been providing say professional development, doing the mentoring and coaching, working alongside with teachers in terms of building the teacher instructional pedagogy. Now we've gone to student facing, to where they're literally working with students, and we're doing this 3 days per week. So that's right now, to me, is a big piece of it. And of course, many of the schools did not start after school tutorials until January, because there is something that called burnout or what have you, from the student's perspective, from the teacher's perspective. Yeah. So right now we have our tutorial and everything else that are in full force. But Dr. Miller is going to speak a little bit, but I also want to remind you, and thank you, Ms. McQuinn did put it in the chat, on Dr. Miller's, on the data that he shared with us, is all around the proficiency, but also keep in mind that we also have learning gains. Learning gains were not something that we looked at last year as they were setting baseline data. And what we do know is that at the end of the year, what we're looking for is making certain that when we are maximizing the instructional opportunities for our students, is that we want to see progress. We want to see that our students are growing from where they're coming in, where they came in from 1 year to the next. Whether it's that 1 year's worth of growth, 2 years worth of growth, what we're wanting to see is that our students are making progress in their deficiency. And if those students are coming on grade level, they're on grade level, how do we accelerate those students that are already there. That's where those learning gain pieces come into play. But unfortunately, learning gains is not the data that we're going to get per se from progress monitoring 1 and 2 data. But Dr. Miller, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's great saving me from all my talking points. So I'll just add, I will just add, Dr. Sheffield's team and my team work well together. And we, like I kind of mentioned before, we have these 4 data checkpoints we've been doing throughout the year where my team provides the data to all the principals. And then Dr. Sheffield's team comes in and provides additional resources that the principals can then take back to their schools, then to help every student. And we're doing that every 4 times this year. And we just finished the checkpoint 3. So, which is wonderful to try to help every single student.
I did have a question, and I may have lost my train of thought. I'm typing as you guys are going. 1, where do parents go into the portal to see the benchmarks? And then 2, is there something where, for example, if a child is not meeting a benchmark, is there like a parent conference or an ability where parents can have a conference? Is that the parent's job or responsibility to make that request unbeknownst to them until I don't even see progress reports until I go into the SIS, but report cards, when they see the report card in nine weeks, is that at that time, do they make an appointment, or at what point do the teachers reach out to or are supposed to reach out to the parents to schedule appointments in regards to?
I'll take the first part of your question. Maybe Dr. Sheffield will take the second part of your question. So the parents can go into our I'm not sure if the benchmark data may not be in SIS yet, but it will be in the future.
Okay.
It's also available in the FAST portal, which is flfast.com. You do need a PIN number that you get from SIS to get into there. That's our security feature. I could share those directions with Dr. Sheffield to share out with the group if you'd like. But then you could go and see your own child's how they're doing on each of the benchmarks and each of the assessments.
Okay. And I think that is also important because I do remember seeing that pin, but it comes off as a SIS pin, not as a FAST pin that came directly from the school. I think it was the administrator that sent that pin because I was like, well, I've had SIS since all of my kids been, since the program initiated. They keep sending me the pin, but I'm in. And it says specifically SIS, but it may say FAST as well. I don't remember everything else, but I know that it identifies or is marked as a SIS pin.
I don't know all the fine details of that part, but I will provide those directions to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think for the second part, Madam Chair, is that in regards to what the school responsibility, of course, if a student is not doing well, the expectation is that that parent is notified, right? But of course, we say to our parents, in terms of keeping up and monitoring and also create those relationships and so things with your child's teacher and with the school, what have you. But most importantly, for any child that's not reading on grade level or reading or not performing math on grade level, math became a part of it, House Bill 7039 this year. But as soon as that is noticed, is the expectation that the parent is contacted because that's where the PMP comes into place, the progress monitoring plan, particularly around reading. And again, for this year, 7039 then brought in the math. But it should not be a requirement from the state to say that you have to notify a parent. That is just what we should be doing in terms of notifying parents when we realize that there is a deficiency and to figure out how do we work together, because it definitely takes a village in regards to working alongside and educating our children. The school can't do it all. They're coming to us. That's where we educate. That's where they spend a lot of their time. But how does it continue once they leave us?
Thank you. I'll recognize Rachel, if I'm reading that correctly.
Yeah, Rachel.
Oh. My eyes are pretty good.
So I had a question. I know we're using these test scores to determine, with other data, if a child should be going into tiered interventions to see if they need extra help. So I was looking at the district's reading decision tree. And the criteria, it says here verbatim, performance criteria that indicates Tier 1 is sufficient for at least 80% of our students. As we look at these scores, and we know that, about approximately 50% of our students did not score on grade level in reading. I know there's other criteria like iReady, or I'm wondering what other, I'm hoping this is our plan. I went through it fast. I'm wondering, why aren't we using this as more efficiently to figure out who's below, and why don't we have more kids getting tiered intervention, because we want more kids to be reading on grade level, on our standardized tests. So what's stopping us from using this data? And to put people into tiers. If we have so many kids, shouldn't 50% of our kids be in receiving reading, additional reading help?
Okay, when you're saying what's stopping us from using, can you clarify for me what's your question, Rachel?
So if a child, I know that, the first, the second, we have that predictive score we could use.
Yes.
So why are we not using that predictive score and saying, they're predicted to score a 2, they're predicted to score a 1. Why are we then using iReady data or other data to knock them out of getting extra help when, they're predicted without any extra help to not pass? So why aren't we using this? Because these scores are so important, especially for our third graders, and also for our fifth graders, because they want to be placed in higher level classes in middle school. The tracking, you want to track in more advanced classes, because then in high school you put yourself at a disadvantage. So if we're seeing 50% of our kids predicted to get a 1, why aren't more kids being placed into tiered intervention? And if, I'm curious what your answer is for that. Mm-hmm.
Well, in terms of what my answer is, we know that there's always a need in regards to, is there room to have additional students there in the interventions, and how do we close that gap? Because I do agree with you, but in terms of bringing on to say that we're using the predictive levels from Progress Monitoring 1 or Progress Monitoring 2, I think that's what your question is.
That's one of the questions.
Can we add the predictive levels to the decision tree in regards to determining Tier 2, Tier 3 intervention? Is that your question?
Yes. I think that would be very important, because if we're predicted not to pass, but for other tests we're scoring above, which might be, they're good, for some reason they're doing well on that. Obviously they're not doing well on this type of test. And this type of test is, testing comprehension, silent reading ability. It's, it's a certain type of test, and that's how we're measuring ourselves against other districts. And
but
also
remember, okay, but remember what I said also around, and Adam is going to speak to this, Dr. Miller, around the Progress Monitoring 1 and Progress Monitoring 2, is that when they take that assessment, what we also have to keep in mind is that what we do when we look at the PM1, PM2 data is that we have to go back and we have to do that true item analysis to see what standard had been taught to the fullest extent. So in regards to being able to use PM1 and PM2 data to determine to put them in a Tier 2 or Tier 3 intervention, that's a risky part for me. We can look at it, but at the same time, you're going to have to do that thorough item analysis to see what standards were taught to the fullest extent when we're looking at the data for Progress 1 and 2. But Dr. Miller wants to speak.
I'll just add to Dr. Sheffield. So we've had this progress monitoring assessment last year and this year. The data when we were getting last year, they told us, as you can see on this slide, we were getting that provisional scale, right? The old scale. They told us we're going to get a new scale. We just weren't really sure when. We just got it, right? So we just got it for PM2, the retrofit scale. So the data actually is changing. I'd be a little hesitant right now until we have another year of the retrofit scores under our belt to really understand and know, what scale scores. We know the levels, but what does that truly mean? Because this is a brand new assessment, and the data is changing, this year.
Well, I understand completely that, and I see your point. But one of the things that kind of is shocking to me is to say that it says in our reading plan that 80% of our kids should be able to score sufficiently with Tier 1 intervention. But we do have data from the previous year, and if they didn't go to summer school, they're coming in with a FAST score of a 1 or a 2. I know the 1s immediately get into Tier 2 intervention, but the 2s are, at a disadvantage. But basically, it says, I think in the reading plan, it says that if there's room, we'll put the 2s in, additional intervention. And to me, that's scary because, what's going to propel them to get to that 3 level? If our goal is to get people at a 3, on grade level, then we need, if they're behind, and we know that from a FAST test that, is norm referenced, and we don't put them into intervention, I feel like we're doing that child a disservice. That's my opinion. And I'm hoping that, we could look into that, because I know everyone wants every child to succeed, is to putting those 2s from the previous year into intervention as soon as they enter in, in the beginning of the next year. Because what's going to make them, our data shows that we're not going up every year. It's not like they're magically going to increase. We need to give them tools to get better, in my opinion.
Thank you, Rachel. Point taken. Thank you.
So I remember my question that I had that I could not remember. And I'll let you, we won't continue because I do know you have another presentation, Dr. Miller. My question that I had was for the USA FSQ, the PBAs, are teachers supposed to be utilizing those for grades? Because what I'm noticing is that teachers are using the scores for grades and they're weighted grades. Like for ELA class, 80% for assessment. And if that child doesn't do good on that assessment, it's a weighted grade, especially if that school doesn't have, or if that particular class are not putting in more assignments. So no matter what that child do in that class, no matter how many A's that child get in that class, that FSQ or that USA or even PBA that they didn't do well on, it defeats the purpose of even trying because it's so weighted. 80% is that assessment in some classes.
And in regards to should they be, that will be a school-based discussion that will need to be had. So if, so I would, then that's why I say that's where the parent and the school-based leader have those discussions. From myself, Dr. Miller's standpoint, in regards to working with the curriculum team and the assessment team, when these assessments and so forth are being developed, they're being developed to assist the school in regards to, again, exactly what it is, formative, summative assessments that are aligned to the scope, which is going to help us gravitate the data to allow us to dig deep to see, are the students getting it? And if not, what additional resources or support is needed for the student and for the teacher? But that particular question will have to be a school-based.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Miller, for that presentation. And members of the committee, if you have any further questions, you can certainly, through the chair, send those, or through staff, send those questions in. And at this time, we'll proceed to the next.
Okay, great. Thank you. So graduation data, we have some great news. So just orient you to this chart. The first column is either Florida or the 7 big districts. We compare ourselves to other districts that are well over 100,000 students. And each of the next columns is the graduation rate from FY19 all the way up to FY23. Please note FY20 and 21 were our COVID years, so students were allowed to graduate without certain requirements. So we don't really compare those 2 years. However, comparing Florida, Palm Beach is on that second row there. You can see in bold our scores, and in green is the Big 7 district that was, had the highest graduation rate. Pinellas was, kind of beating us for a little bit. But now we're on top. Last school year, we were on top at 89% overall graduation rate. That's including all our public, traditional public schools, as well as our charter schools in the district. And now we're at 90.5. So we increased 1.5%, which is wonderful. If you take the charter schools out, I believe we get to 94% graduation rate. So I'm going to move on. Breaking this down by subgroup is also another reason to celebrate. This chart is set up the same, table is set up the same way as the last table. However, we have some new columns. We have the subgroups in the second column. We also have two columns at the end, a 1 year change, which is just the difference from FY22 to FY23, and the 5 year change, the difference from FY19 to FY23. The top table is Florida. The bottom table is Palm Beach. I color-coded green for the FY23 grad rates where we beat the state. And I also color-coded green at 1 year differences that where we beat the state. And I also did the same thing for the 5 year change. So you can see in all our subgroups, except we tied for our L's, the graduation rate at 76.1, but we are growing our students at a faster rate, both this year and over the last 5 years than the state. And we're very proud of that. I just want to shout out some schools. Some of us are parents and, attend different schools. Our kids attend different schools. This is the top schools that had the highest 1 year change. So we do see some of our alternative sites at the top with the highest 1 year changes, but we also see some of our other comprehensive high schools like Boynton Beach High, Glade Central, Forest Hill, Lakes, Royal Palm Beach, my hometown, John I, Atlantic, Gardens, and Seminole Ridge, all with greater than 2 percentage point change over the last year. And then I'd also like to shout out to our schools that have over a 95% or higher graduation rate for their students. You can see the list there. I will point out the third one is Glade Central, was also on the previous slide. They have a 97.2% graduation rate. So you can see the scores there. We're very, very happy and excited about that. A lot of the interventions and strategies we've been doing as a district have been paying off. But I do want to remind you, last time I was here, I came with some doom and gloom that, students that when they graduate, there's certain requirements they have to meet. They have to have 24 credits, at least a 2.0 GPA, and get a level 3 or higher in the 10th grade reading test, as well as the algebra EOC. However, students that don't meet the reading or the math requirement have the ability to use a concordance score, which is where they take another test. And if they score a certain score, they then meet that graduation requirement. So last year, the state, and they've been trying to do this for a number of years, was going to increase the concordance scores and make them higher. And that was going to have some significant impacts on our graduation rates of our students. And we looked at it broken down by subgroup. I did not bring that slide again, but I believe every single subgroup was impacted by at least by double digits. So I do want to point out, so the state did for last school year, at the end of the school year, they did relent and leave things mostly as they were. Which was great, and we see that reflected in our graduation rates. However, they are talking again about doing this in FY24 and increasing or changing the concordant requirements. And I just want to make you aware quickly of what some of those are. So the first set of rows is ELA. The second set is that algebra. The second column is FY23, what that concordance score requirement was, and FY24 is what the score is going to be. So we're just looking at reading. We see the SAT was on the evidence-based reading and writing was a 430. That is increasing by 50 points to a 480. The SAT reading by itself has been removed. Students had to get a 24 on that. The ACT, the average of the English and reading subtests, stayed the same at 18, but they did remove the ACT reading only section. But they are adding this classical learning test, I believe we talked about last time, which is a new concordance option that is now all state universities and colleges have to use it as a college entrance exam or have to accept it. So the students need to score 36. meet concordance there. Our Ls also have a portfolio option that was available last year and will continue to be offered for our Ls that have been here for less than 2 years. Looking at math, we had the PERT test, and the PERT test was very helpful for our students in math. We had a lot of success in students passing that PERT test with the one. I believe they raised the score. It was lower before, and they did raise it last year, but they did remove the PERT test for this current school year. All the other options, the PSAT math, SAT math, ACT math, and the geometry EOC, which were options, have not changed. However, and this is a positive, I believe, from what we're seeing so far, this classical learning test also has a math section called quantitative reasoning. The state has said you need 11 to earn concordance there. So that's 11 out of 40. I'll just leave that for a second. So a student needs to get 11. If they take 40 questions and they get 11 correct, they meet concordance. So that, I believe, was going to help some students. I also, one last data point, then we'll get to questions. We did talk about this last time. So what percent of our students that graduated, last time I brought FY22 data, what percent of the students used only concordance scores? And this is either or, reading or math. But we can see, so we have it broken up by male and female. Male is lighter blue, female is a darker blue. But this is all students. So about 37 to 38% of all students needed some kind of concordance score to graduate. Our Black students is about 50%. Our Hispanic students was right around 40%. Our white students was right around 27%. Our Ls, over 70% of our English language learners needed a concordance score to graduate. 45% of our students on free and reduced lunch needed a concordance score to graduate, and only about 20% of our students with disabilities needed a concordance score to graduate. However, if these more stringent concordance scores do take effect, they will have impacts on our graduation rate. We're not able to tell right now exactly because we don't know what the effects of the classic learning test are yet, because that's a new test this year and we won't know until the end of the year what impacts it has. So that is the end of my presentation. I think we have a hand and I'll take more questions.
Yes. This is.
Ms. Lubin, you are recognized.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
I do have a question. With the CLT, you said for math there were 40 questions and you needed 11?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And for the, let's see, the verbal reasoning, how many questions are on that?
I believe the verbal reasoning and grammar together is about 80 points, around there. So they need about 36 out of the 80 to earn concordance there.
And is that test available to see exactly what's on it?
Yeah.
Yes, you can go to, you could just search classic learning test, and there's a sample test. You could see what the reading test and the math test look like. I'll also send that to the chair so she can distribute that as well.
Okay.
Through staff.
Thank you very much.
And then, Madam Chair, I just wanted, if Dr. Miller, if you can leave that slide there.
Mm-hmm.
But and thank you, Dr. Miller, for adding in the graduation rates because it is a lagging indicator. But you can see the success there. But I do want to say that we will continue, and that is part of what we're doing now, and it's also part of our planning for this summer. What we've done, what we have been doing, what we will continue to do, such as provide funding for our schools around the ACT, SAT prep during the year, also during the summer. This summer, we're not just doing the ACT, SAT prep for those students that are still needing, their assessment or what have you, and wanting to look at the concordant route, but we are also adding the class portion to that. And then I know, Dr. Miller, I think you guys have also provided schools with the sample of the resource that they could purchase, the booklet that's
Correct.
available for the class.
For the CLT test, there is a practice book. We provide that information to the schools. Correct.
Thank you. And which is a study guide, so making certain that the schools have access to purchase the guides to assist the students. And for those that may be having difficulty in purchasing, which some of our smaller schools, and making certain that those students also have access to those materials. So thank you to Dr. Neal and the team for just bringing forth in regards to what these changes are and where we are just continuing to provide the additional support for the students.
Now, question for you is that the classic, guides that you were just referring to? Is that the classical learning test or just the classical?
The ACT and SAT, there's practice books, been around for decades. The classical learning test is a newer test. And it just really came into our public school system this year for the graduation requirements and to get into college. So we're providing the practice book for both the classical learning test, both the reading and the math section.
Okay, and then my question is, you may not know this off the top of your head, but I'm going to go there. The SAT and ACT, there's a cost to those two as well, correct?
The practice book?
The practice books.
I'm not really sure how.
The schools we've already provided those. Those have already been provided to the schools. We provide those to them, so they have it for the classes. Because the high schools actually offer a course around the ACT, SAT prep. Believe it or not, our junior and seniors, their reading class is around ACT, SAT prep.
Okay, and then the CLT, do you know how much those books would normally cost?
I don't have a cost on that.
We do have a cost. I just don't remember off the top of my head, but I will
email.
And
that's just because for those schools that don't have them, maybe this is the time we have, organizations that are represented here at the AAC and other other advisory committee members. That's something that, if the hopes is that the district will be able to afford to get them out to some of the schools.
Well, absolutely. We've made a commitment. So for those that are not, we are already working on a plan to make certain that all of our schools have them. So no one will be without.
Thank you. So that's another school SAC question then for the schools. Thank you. Any other questions for Dr. Miller? Hearing none, Dr. Miller, thank you very much for this very informative, two informative presentation. We thank you, and we're going to have to get together so I can make sure I capture all of your notes and the questions correctly.
Sure, no problem. It was lovely to present to everyone. I appreciate the questions.
Thank you, and we will. Well, we wouldn't see Dr. Miller for PM3. That would be FY
that would be
25.
FY25 because because that data will come in. Of course, over the summer, we'll be sitting there with fingers, over the summer. So he'll probably come back in August.
Thank you.
But Madam Chair, I do want to make note that during the roll call, we also had our outstanding board member that has joined us as well.
Thank you. Good evening, Ms. McQuinn. And if there's any
Good evening. I was just a couple of minutes late joining you, and even my mind is a little boggled from all the data, but I love it. Thank you.
I agree. At this time, is there anyone who is on the call who was not here during roll call, but we would like to recognize you at this time?
Hi, this is Randy. I was not here during roll call.
Thank you. We've received your name for the roll call. Any other names? Hearing none, we will move on to the last item of the agenda, which is questions and answers. If we had any questions at this time. And before we go with questions and answers, I do want to just emphasize what our staff member, Dr. Sheffield, did share early on at the beginning of this meeting regarding presence in the room. This room is lovely. We have the microphones. They have invested in new microphones. There's a staff member that is here, not only staff members, 2 staff members that are here, but also a tech person that is dedicated to be here in this room and in a hybrid fashion. So I do want to emphasize, if you are able to make the meeting, to attend the meeting in person. I think it's more personal to attend the meeting in person and allow for those who can attend online, of course, to attend online, but also want to make sure that we are doing what we're supposed to be doing in the room as well, because there's items that are printed in the rooms there, it's a waste of resources that's going on right now. And unfortunately, we cannot go 100% online. But there's a lot of wasted resources currently in this room. And I'm not sure, but I would like to know, as the chair, Ms. Wood, was there anyone who shared that they would not be in attendance in the room?
Just Mr. Collins.
Thank you. So, and also going forward, just please allow, notify Ms. Woods if you're not attending in the room, again, so that we're not wasting the resources that we continue to waste each month. And I'm preaching to myself as well, the choir.
You have a question, Madam Chair. I'm Dr. Mendez Gabriela.
Dr. Mendez, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, yes, I teach I teach and I work late here, and I'm 40 minutes away from the district. So I didn't know I had to let you. I was in another committee before, and I then had to let people know that I was not going. But if it is okay with the committee, I will be able to participate in it only if I can do it always from here because of my other obligations, work related. And my question is, how can we address generative AI in the district? I know that students are using it to do their homework or to do other things too. I see it in the college level. I've been in many conferences regarding this topic, and I didn't hear anything from the district about this.
Dr. Mendez, is your question related to a topic that was recently presented today?
No, my question is how do we propose a topic like this to advise or to address in the committee?
We can definitely take it to staff, not only take it to staff, but also if you would like to send an email through staff with exactly your topic and how it relates to the Academic Advisory Committee, I'm sure we can look at a future meeting to put that item on.
So should I send it to Ms. Diane Wood? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. You may send it to Ms. Wood and she'll get with staff so that we can have it on item.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Ms. Feldman, you're recognized.
Thank you. Based on
we barely can hear you. You may have to talk into your mic.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Better, much better.
Okay, so based on Ms. Mendez's comment, and it's been a while since we've done this, I think we should actually set aside time for going over a list of topics that we can then prioritize as a board with, of course, staff input as to what timing would work best for them.
I would love for us to do that. I don't think I would not entertain a working meeting at this time. I would say that each committee go back to because we are here representing various.
I'm talking about at our future meeting, not in this.
Oh, yes. Oh, okay. Yes.
Our next
we can certainly set some time.
Outline our topics, our future topics.
Okay, we can certainly send Dr. Sheffield. We can center some time. I think 15 minutes at the next meeting on the agenda for the next meeting. So, yeah, for the next meeting, where each member of this body can go back to between now and the next meeting, they can go back to their respective organizations and whoever placed them on this committee and see what topics they would like to be discussed or be brought forth to the committee. Thank you for that, Ms. Feldman.
Just to clarify, Ms. Mendez, I think that is in no way, shape, or form to discourage you from submitting your email with your ideas to what should be covered, because I think that's important to do as well. And so I look forward to hearing more about it, but I think that would be a good first step. And then we can talk about that or other ideas that come up at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Duly noted, Madam Chair. We will, Ms. Wood is making a note, and we will create a section as an agenda item for next month's meeting.
And I ask, and may I ask through the staff if Ms. Wood can send the email of the policy from the Academic Advisory Committee, just so we are remembering why we are here and what we are doing. So when those topics do come forth, they know that, it aligns with the work that we're supposed to be doing on this committee.
Duly noted.
Are there any questions or any comments or announcements to come before the body? I do see a hand. Ms. Rachel, you are recognized.
Yes, I had a question. I know this was supposed to be, there was a legislation that said that a dyslexia screener was going to be implemented in the 2023-24 school year, and I have not heard any update on that. I think I asked at the beginning of the school year, and you said you hadn't gotten the directives from the state yet, so I was wondering if there's been any update.
Was that something that came before this body through staff, or was that something that was during a specific presentation?
I think we talked about it at the beginning of I know I mentioned it. It was when we talked about legislation, I think we talked.
Okay, so that would have been with, who presented?
It would have been House, I'm sorry. That would have been with House Bill 7039. So I'll make a note and I'll add that as part of my comments for March.
Thank you.
Any additional questions to come before the body or any announcements? Hearing none, I will give you all back about 13 minutes of your time. Have a great evening, everyone. Our next commission meeting or committee meeting will be March, and I just want to make sure that I'm correct with this. It would be March 11th. If I'm not mistaken. Thank you. So the next meeting will be March 11th. Have a great evening, all.
Thank you all, and have a nice evening.
Thank you. You too.
See you all in March.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.